You're listening to Mad Radio. Mad Radio. Mad Radio. Make a difference.
Quick, me lads! Hoist the rigging!
Aye, Captain!
Splice the main brace!
Aye, Captain!
Batten down the hatches!
Aye, Captain!
I'm going below deck to get the show started. And now, fresh from his behemoth breakup of a two-headed mermaid, it's the mythical merman himself, Brandon McCarty.
Well, thank you, Petey. Oh boy. Well, welcome in, all you scallywags, you swashbucklers, landlubbers, hornswogglers, and salty dogs to the Peg Leg Podcast, a show where we delve into the lives of fellow pirates and learn a bit more about the unsung heroes among us all. Arr! This week we travel to the Morris Building upstairs. Ho-ho! To speak with an individual who has a bachelor's degree in American Studies with a minor in opera performance, also a master's degree in instructional technology. Ooh. She started out as an outreach recruiter at the MJC in 2001. She went on to become the curriculum specialist in 2002. She did that job for quite some time, even going up to Columbia College all the way through 2016. She became an articulation officer. I don't know what that is, but we are certainly going to find out in 2016, and that's what she currently is. She is a painter, a singer, a writer, a hiker, a skier, a whole slew of things. She's a mom to a son. She has sung the Star-Spangled Banner so many times, I don't think that even I can count that high. But she was also an entertainer in a Vegas restaurant. We're going to find out a little bit more about that as well. Please welcome to the poop deck. I know, it's a horrible name, but Letitia Senechal.
Well done. A+ on the name pronunciation.
Oh, perfect.
Sometimes even I struggle, let's be honest.
So, Letitia, how did you find your way to MJC?
It was definitely not linear, let's be honest. Okay, so I finished college, and I struggled with figuring out what I was going to do next.
Like all of us.
Like all of us, for sure. And
right.
I had a lot of interests, a lot of passions, hard to pick. I never had an easy time figuring out how to apply what I wanted to do with my life, and I was definitely an idealist, let's be honest. So it was largely out of pragmatism, and I guess at the time, if you want to call it that, romance. I after a few wayward stops after my education in Connecticut, University of Connecticut, I met a boyfriend who had grown up in Modesto, and he had a condominium right on Tully Road within walking distance of the college. We were living in the Bay Area at the time, and we decided, as the economy was beginning to constrict, that we were going to go live in his condo, and he encouraged me to apply at Modesto Junior College, where he really sang the praises of this little community college in the valley. And so I applied and was scheduled for an interview on a date that was very interesting. It was September 12th, 2001, the day after the 9/11 attacks.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yes. That was very surreal.
I can't even imagine how the interview went, or how you were feeling, or what the air of the right.
Yes, it was a very anxious time. Like, first of all, I didn't even know if I knew how to get from Berkeley, where I was renting a room at the time, to drive here to Modesto. But what I can say without hesitation is that when eventually, after arriving late for my interview with Susie Agostini and Judy Drummond and a number of other beautiful people, I arrived late. When I set foot into conference room A for the first time, without knowing whether or not I was going to get a job, I felt like, wow, this place feels like home.
Of the Morris Building.
Of the Morris,
Okay.
Conference Room A of the Morris Building,
Okay,
exactly.
right.
Yes. Glenn Stovall was there. There were a lot of, Adon Alanis, who's no longer at the college, but yeah, a lot of great people were there. Yeah.
Very nice. So, kind of give us a picture as to how or where you grew up. Did you move around a lot? Was it, give us a window.
Okay. Well, first of all, context. My parents aren't, my dad's from Connecticut. My mom's from South Dakota. They met when my father was in medical school. My mom was in nursing school, like stereotypical, like stories, frat parties, whatever. But in all honesty, my dad was a man of humble means. He actually, he did very well academically and ended up going to an Ivy League school. But he could only do so because the military was going to pay for his education. So as a result, I was a Navy brat. And I was born at now is the doubly old Naval Hospital in Camp Pendleton. I essentially spent kindergarten through sixth grade, in my hometown of Carlsbad, with my two older siblings, and my parents, but there was divorce. There was a lot of tumult as well. So, I grew up in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And Carlsbad was just the start. So, yes.
So then, take us on the journey. Then
Okay.
So it was. You said Carlsbad.
Oh yes. So I think second or third grade, my parents were separated. My dad got orders from Camp Pendleton to go to Washington D.C. to take some sort of promotional admin job. In the medical corps. And then my mom was staying put in Carlsbad. So I think in the sixth grade, my mom decided that she didn't want to live in Carlsbad, which to me is kind of cute and laughable now because she thought I was growing too fast back in 1984. So she and her partner at the time decided they were going to move to Colorado. So I had the choice of living with my dad wherever he was stationed or my mom, and circumstances would have it that I ended up living with my dad in Charleston. He was then stationed at the Naval Hospital, Charleston, South Carolina. And so I spent two absolutely, it brings tears to my eyes, magical years with my father, living close to the Ashley River off of Highway 61 in Charleston, where we were adjacent to Drayton Hall Plantation, Middleton Plantation, and all the lush history there. I had a magnificent surrogate mother across the street, horseback riding lessons under the live oaks of Highway 61. Like it was very, very sweet. And I had some really awesome quality time with my dad. And then after that, my dad got orders to Bethesda. And so I moved to Bethesda, Maryland, or Gaithersburg, Maryland, where I went to high school for 1 year. Then we got orders again. He got orders. And my mom decided, unrelated to my father, she and my stepdad moved to upstate South Carolina. But when my dad got orders to go back, ironically, to Camp Pendleton, hands down, I knew that I needed to go back and finish out my high school education in Carlsbad with the kids that I had known since I was a toddler. So I ended up going back and going to Carlsbad High School with all the people I had gone K through 6 with, which was very surreal because a lot happens, let's be honest,
right.
between like 6th and 10th grade, right?
Yeah.
like puberty.
You were a completely different person at that point.
Totally.
So how did you find your way out to the West Coast then?
Well, so that was Carlsbad. So we did the high school education there. And at that time, interestingly enough, my dad had gotten remarried when we were in Charleston. So I had a baby sister my junior year of high school with my new stepmom. And then I think because I had spent a lot of my childhood summers on the East Coast with the Senechal side of my family, I thought, oh, you go to college on the East Coast. Maybe it was all those movies like Dead Poets Society that we just like, I just thought, oh, college is like an East Coast thing. So even though I applied to California universities and at best my grades, even though I was like a mediocre honors student, I ended up marginally getting into schools, to colleges. And let's be honest, I mean, as a nod to all of our community college students, like, the role of families breaking up and relocation, it's big and it affects your psychology. And you're not quite ready to be like, oh, I'm going to go out and be so-and-so. You got a lot of sort of like repacking of your luggage to deal with, right? So I applied to the University of Connecticut. It was just down the road from where my father's parents were. And I had to go in on appeal because my grades were just under par for what they were looking for. But I did end up going to UConn in 1990. Yeah, I'm dating myself. Maybe I shouldn't do that.
So from UConn to what?
When I graduated from UConn, I still wasn't quite sure who I was, where I needed to be. And at this point, what's interesting, I have to speak to my undergrad experience because I was a vocalist. I sang, and they noticed that, right? I just went and sang some bars in the music department. They're like, we'll take you. But then I also enjoyed writing and art and whatnot. And I really leaned into food service for whatever reason. I spent a lot of my undergrad working in food services for the University of Connecticut. But I still was like, I had all these interests and a lot of confusion, like much like our MJC students do. So I was kind of confused, and I realized when I got out of college that outside of my college experience at the University of Connecticut, I had no real first-person experience as like an adult in Connecticut. So I was very lost because I didn't have the college community anymore. So I was like, well, I'll just go back to Carlsbad. So I packed my little Toyota Tercel, grabbed a best friend. We had a magical trip across the country. And I got to Carlsbad, realized like, oh, it's not the same when you leave and come back. At this point, my mother had relocated to Las Vegas.
Okay.
They followed construction booms. So it was like Carlsbad to Durango, where there's a ski resort, then to South Carolina for whatever was going on there, and then Vegas because there was a big boom at the time, 1996. So I went, and my mom graciously let me stay with them in Vegas. And that is where I didn't know what to do after majoring in American Studies and voice. She said, because she's from South Dakota, you should really go check out that Macaroni Grill. They've got singers there. So I interviewed at the Macaroni Grill very close to the Strip. In fact, if I must be honest, there was one night that I was there that there was like a bunch of people from a porn convention.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like that's a little bit, but it was very interesting because it was like, whoa, you're in Vegas now. and I'd have to sing Italian art song there. And so I ended up getting a permanent, like not tenure track, obviously, but a permanent job singing opera at night in the new Macaroni Grill that went in close to Summerlin. And I sang there for a couple years. And so that was my gig. And so what was really surreal about that was I would be out enjoying my day off, like across town, miles away. And you realize like Vegas is this little big town, and people would be like, they'd be like, hey, you're that opera singer from the restaurant, like 20 miles away. There was one day I was this is a classic. I was getting off an exit where there were like two lanes of cars getting off the exit. And there's this really like jalopy kind of car next to me. And there's somebody making like big gestures in the driver's seat. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, should I look? Should I look? Should I look? And I look over and my window happens to be rolled down. And all of a sudden I look over and there's this guy gesturing at me and he goes, hey, Letitia, sing me some funicula. It's funny. Vegas is kind of a crazy place, but.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, being a weird sort of like not a celebrity, but a celebrity from doing that was very strange. So yeah, that was Vegas. But eventually I tired of that.
Right. And so from Vegas, then you went to?
So there was a monsoon in Vegas, and my car got flooded. And for whatever reason, they hadn't done the proper engineering of the site at the apartment where I was hanging out that night. So the monsoon dropped about in the parking lot like 2.5 feet of water, which flooded my car. So I was able to file an insurance claim, which gave me like $25,000, maybe $3,000 for the damage that was done to the car. And I used that to go and transport myself to my college friend's apartment in Berkeley. And she let me live in her living room for about 6 months. And I stayed in the Bay Area, and I worked for special needs software companies, dealing with like manipulatives and stuff and doing marketing for them. And then, there I stayed, and I met my then boyfriend, who happened to be from Modesto. And so
And the rest is history.
kind of the rest is history. And he had his condominium when the economy kind of tanked just before 9/11. We retreated to his New Porter condominium, where before we even did that, though, I applied for a job at Modesto Junior College just because he had sung his praises about the department. And I think to give credit where credit is due, he was incredibly fond of his experiences with Ann Smith in the English department. And
You know what? I had her in high school. Yes.
And added fact, I occasionally bumped into Ann Smith on the ski slopes at Kirkwood. Random.
Really?
So there might be another episode.
Huh. Interesting.
Oh, it's Ann Smith. Wow, fun.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Quite a few. I
Yes.
could go on and on.
Yes.
What are some of your hobbies outside of work?
In all honesty, I remember spending a lot of time as a child in my room. And maybe there was my parents had a difficult divorce. So to entertain myself, I would often draw or sing. And, I am one of those kids that grew up with, like, in direct parallel with the revival of Little Orphan Annie. So I think I remember getting, the vinyl album of Annie, and I didn't quite understand, but a lot of adults were very happy to give it to me because as a child, I wouldn't let people talk to me unless they addressed me as Cher. So I when this Annie album came to me, apparently, without seeing the musical, I learned all the music and I was singing it a lot. So on any given day, I was a Broadway singer or I was an artist drawing pictures. So to that end, I feel like I am a repressed singer / artist. And I actually enjoy writing a lot. And I think that writing for me has been a very healthy outlet for processing I loved moving around the country and changing my home environments and everything, but it also came with certain hardships, as it might for anyone adapting to new family, parenting structures, new siblings,
Sure.
new zip codes,
Right.
and then also feeling like an alien in any land that you go to. So writing became an outlet for me. So all three of those things, I think, competed for equal attention in my mind, and as a result, I'm none of them.
Is there anything that you've written that you would like to publish at some point, or?
Wow. I think, writing for me is more of a processing space. In fact, one of my closest friends, I met my freshman year of high school at Magruder High School in Rockville, Maryland. We met, I think, maybe in March, when I already knew that my dad had orders to go back to Camp Pendleton in California. And we met, and we were as thick as thieves, and we just made each other laugh. And what ensued after I met Binky, her real name is Evangeline, but I call her Binky, is that we wrote these copious letters to each other over time. And we joked about a lot of things. We had a lot of inside jokes going back and forth, but it's very interesting because we're still very close to this day. She lives down in San Diego County because she was actually born in San Diego. We had this strange connection. We actually created this blog space where we write privately to each other in a blog as opposed to the U.S. Postal Service, which we definitely exploited as teens. We write back and forth to each other, and a lot of it is processing current events, personal events, motherhood. Both she and I were late to motherhood. I had my son when I was close to 39 years old. So grappling with that and our family structures and all that. So not to publish, maybe unless it's posthumously, So, like, maybe make sure I'm dead and gone before any of that is published.
Well, I'm sure that it would, a lot of things help others, our experiences and
Oh, for
stuff.
sure.
And,
Yeah,
well, maybe one day.
maybe one day.
What is something that you pride yourself in?
Oh my. I feel it's funny because I just turned 50. So I feel like most anything I do right now is more of an exercise of survival rather than, being polished. I don't know if you feel that. I mean, we're kind of you're a little behind me, but we're in similar stations in our life.
Right.
I think, we've talked about this, but relationship building. Relationships are everything. As much as I would like to say I can get up on stage and sing a song and throw my whole soul into it, or I can, paint a picture that might hang on a wall somewhere. Like, I think being a good friend, being there for people, especially in this fast world that we live in where everyone's preoccupied or overwhelmed. And I just feel like when I think about my childhood and how many beautiful adults or friends and neighbors were there for me to just process, probably to a ridiculous extent, out loud, like, I feel like being a friend is probably one of the most valuable things that we can give each other at this time. I that's today, but that's where I am, and that's where life has led me to this moment. So,
What motivates you?
joy. However you can achieve it, whether it's the joy of actually getting to the end of your to-do list every day, or the joy of, I don't know, accomplishing something that maybe intimidated you. The joy of seeing a friend that maybe you took for granted 20 years before, and that you realize how instrumental they were in forming your identity. I think finding my way to joy in any possible moment and trying to find that something that's instructive in any moment that seems adversarial. Let's find our way to joy. Let's not dwell in whatever is frustrating us. Let's not ignore the realities of the frustration, but let's see the humor in it. Let's laugh at ourselves. Let's not take ourselves too seriously.
That's an excellent answer. Well, that goes right into the next question, basically. What do you like about the MJC community as a whole?
Oh my gosh. I could get emotional. So, before I came to Modesto, and with the boyfriend who was from Modesto, et cetera, the Bay Area economy was constricting. And I was never one of those people in sort of the .com boom that was high on their horse. Like, I was always still trying to, pay my bills each month and whatnot. When I interviewed for, at that point was like an outreach position, the hiring manager at the time was very enthusiastic and supportive, and she was concerned that the disparity in wages between Bay Area wages and Modesto wages would drive me away or make me not interested in the position. And so, but I had wisdom teeth that were basically 5 years overdue from being pulled out. So I was in pain. I had not had any benefits or anything like that. I was just so grateful to have stable employment, and the distinguished sort of feeling of getting hired by a college, I think, was really magical. But I think more than anything, what told me about the heart and soul of MJC was within a few days after being offered a permanent position at the college, or maybe it was even a temporary position that maybe eventually became full-time. The dean of admissions and records who had hired me was very concerned about my welfare, and coming from the Bay Area and the wages that I would be offered. And she basically had told me that she had been at some event, some garage sale or someone had some furniture, and she immediately offered to outfit me with furniture for wherever I was living and bedding. Like, I couldn't believe how, after being in the Bay Area where there was this, honestly, this like vibe of ego and sort of like make a lot of money in the .com boom, blah, 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 blah. And it was very cutthroat, to come to a community where this boss who didn't know me from Adam was ready and concerned that I didn't have like a bedside table, like just the heart.
Yeah.
And so like this place has always, since that moment, just been a place of heart and relationships and care and also humility. Sorry, I can wax poetic on that for a long time.
No, that's all good stuff.
Susie Agostini, man. Unforgettable.
Where are some of your favorite places to eat?
Oh, my. I definitely enjoy Papa Pablo's and a good Greek salad. We also enjoy Fumi Sushi. My son has cultivated a relationship with Paul Tong, who always treats us like gold. Yeah, you know Paul.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Quite hilarious. We haven't been in a long time, so I say this with like more of a confession. But I also really have a soft spot in my heart for Pho 7 over there at Carver and Roseburg. It's the Vietnamese place, the little family-run operation. And maybe it's because we've been going in there since my son was a toddler. And at the same time, the owners have their little girl in there who's Vietnamese, obviously, and they've sort of grown up together. So we enjoy the food there as well. And then I have to put in a nod for my son Russell, who really enjoys Thai House at the shopping center very close to our house, which is totally in Stanford.
All right.
We go in there and they know what he's going to order. He doesn't even have to order anymore.
Man, I have to check some of those places out.
Right?
Although, yeah, I'm well versed in Fumi Sushi.
Sushi. Sake ball.
Oh my gosh. Sometimes too many.
Sometimes too many. Amen.
Tell us a funny story or experience that you've had.
Oh my goodness.
Either personal or professional.
I thrive on humor. Actually, it's basically what gets me through any given day. But I think probably one of my favorite memories is from about, 10 or 12 years ago, when I was the curriculum specialist in the Morris building. I worked very closely with the person, the person who has what is now Kelly Addington's position, Sean Fernelli. We worked very closely together, and we'd have to go back and forth on any given day and talk tasks. And sometimes I can be a little uptight and OCD about certain things, and maybe almost like it's probably doesn't reflect very well on my personality. So anyway, I had left my office for whatever reason, and I come back in, and I'm obviously very mission driven on getting something done. And I go to sit at my desk, and Sean Fernelli comes in, and I can't remember, he'd probably know the story better than I would, but he comes in to talk to me. We're talking about something that needs to get done for the curriculum committee. And I'm very uptight. I'm very focused. And I'm like, well, so what are we going to do next? We got to get this done. And Sean was one of fewer words, right? Bright guy. But he's like, it's quiet for a second. And I'm like, well, we got to do this or we got to do that. And there's this pause. And I maybe I'm misrepresenting the story, but all of a sudden I hear this voice go, hey, how's it going? And it's not Sean. And I'm sitting there, and Sean's watching me as I'm sitting at my station, and I look around, and it's like, what are you doing? I hear this voice again. And it's a dead pause, and I'm like, what's going on? And I look around, and Sean, deadpan, because he was very good at deadpan, he goes, well, aren't you going to answer? And I'm totally baffled. And it's only at that moment where I look under my desk and see Melissa Beach crouched in the fetal position under my desk. Totally having this ridiculous conversation with me as I'm obviously off the charts uptight about something. It's just it's one of my most beloved memories of the college. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, could always keep it real there. Never take yourselves too seriously. That was, I think, the lesson.
Lots of fun in that Morris building.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Who has been your biggest influence, either professionally or personally?
So my family, my mother is the youngest of an Irish Catholic family. My grandmother had my mother when she was either 46 or 47, maybe 48. I don't know, because we weren't sure how old my grandmother was. But my mom was a surprise in 1943 to my grandmother. And my mother grew up under sort of the close oversight of her older siblings, Suzanne and Letitia. So I have an aunt, Letitia. Letitia was married. My mom and my aunt Letitia went to nursing school together at the nursing school adjacent to Creighton University, where my mom met my dad. And at the same time, my aunt Letitia, who was I think already somewhat accomplished as a young nurse, started hanging out with this seminarian, this I believe Jesuit seminarian priest, and Ron. Ron ultimately left the priesthood for my Aunt Letitia, and they never had children. That was not an option for them. But I spent many summers either visiting Letitia and Ron, Ron ended up teaching at a Christian Brothers Academy outside of New York City in New Jersey, and he'd teach Latin. But Ron was hilarious, but also incredibly spiritual and intellectual, like a super dope dude. And then Letitia, of course, was and is still very lovely. And Ron was diagnosed with cancer when I was in the 4th or 5th grade. And so I would travel to the East Coast in the summer. They lived East Coast, of course. I was West Coast. And so my visits to the East Coast were very sacred to me. And so I had these summers with Ron, who was going through this illness. And I have these distinct memories of being by his bedside when he was on bed rest, and he would be covered with bed sores. And I was, 8th grade, 9th grade, watching this person introspect, who's a very deeply spiritual and intellectual man, about why he was here and maybe how his life had turned out, what he had done right, what he had done wrong, and watching the physical therapist come and turn him over and treat him for bed sores. And I just remember watching Ron, but meanwhile, as he's going through this arduous experience of being ill and going through this cancer, he's writing these profound essays about his spirituality and about his faith journey, and I think to this day, I remember, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say?" And I'm probably misquoting it at this point, but I just feel in the abstract, the experience of being around a profoundly spiritual and intellectual person who was an educator in the community, I feel anchored me in a sense of duty on the planet, on this human experience or this global experience, with a reverence for that which we see and we can't see and we don't understand, and his humility as he walked toward death, and the fact that, I was named after the greatest love of his life. Like, I just feel like I was so blessed to be there in that moment as they went through that. We lost Ron, and Letitia is remarried again. I just saw her in June. But it's those lovely people and sometimes those small moments, I think, that speak to us. There's lots of academic people I've known and whatnot, but I think it's watching someone facing the end of the line and and how they deal with it. I think that was probably the most instructive thing that ever happened to me. Sorry.
If you had a plane ticket to anywhere in the world, free plane ticket in your hand, where would you go and why?
COVID changed everything. COVID basically, reminded me of how short life is. Now, I live here in Modesto. I'm fortunate. My mother lives a mile away and has been actively involved in my son's life. But my father remarried and went back to his home state, and he lives in Connecticut with my stepmom, and then my half siblings, all live in a reasonable distance from my dad. If Philadelphia from Connecticut's a reasonable distance, I don't know. But, I would go back to see those family members that, that's a question I grapple with. My Aunt Letitia is one of them. She lives outside of New York City. That's, of course, where I would go. And as much as I've spent most of my life spending my vacations visiting dear family members and not going to swim up bars, or although that's on the bucket list, I haven't been able to do that. That's where I would go. So definitely just to see the people that matter the most, for better or worse. That's what it's about.
All right. If you had 3 albums that you could listen to, that you had to listen to for the rest of your life, no more than that, just 3 albums, which albums would those be and why?
Okay. So when a lot of stuff I crosswalk to the students that we serve. And so after I moved from Carlsbad as a mediocre honors student to the East Coast, I was really homesick my freshman year at UConn. I found myself definitely I felt like a whole, I guess you could say just a truck drop of stuff caught up with me in sort of that space. And if you're not a New England person, I always remarked at how in winter, the whole landscape went from being this lush, verdant kind of green, humid, forest to all the deciduous trees just drop their leaves. And then you're just surrounded by the brown earth of the deciduous trees. It looks like dog fur. I mean, and so and it's not just for a month. Modesto has a couple months of winter. Out there, it's you've got October to May where you're just in dog fir trees, right? Or it's brown, oh my God. So I had this huge depression because what happened is after I graduated from high school, my dad retired from the Navy and he ended up getting a civilian medical administrator job near his hometown. So I was like, oh my goodness, I've really moved here. I don't have roots in Carlsbad anymore. So I took a year off and I went back to Carlsbad. I tried to make it on my own and I got cut off. My dad's like, if you're leaving college, you pay your own bills. So I tried to support myself for a year. That was not pretty. Anyway, so I eventually realized that life without college. And so I ended up working at Thrifty Drugstore where I was what they call the straightener. I don't know if you guys know this, but there are people that literally are employed in these retail places that their job is not to check people out or fill inventory, but they just straighten product. So I would
love that job.
Well, I have a certain sentimentality about it to this day because it was about the straightening, the dusting, and the music. Okay, you with me?
Yes. Yeah.
So I spent hours just dusting and straightening Thrifty product down on Tamarack Avenue in Carlsbad for years. And so eventually I figured out that I was kind of not going anywhere with that. And I ate humble pie, and the University of Connecticut took me back in a year later. And when I got to college, my mom had taken note that I liked the song Closer to Fine by the Indigo Girls. So for whatever reason, when I went back to Yukon and I found myself in the all-girls dorm after this surreal junior adult year out in Carlsbad, I found myself listening to the Indigo Girls album Rites of Passage.
Okay.
Which is a very introspective album. I think maybe the Galileo song is on that album, but it's just a very deep album that you can tell they're working out their stuff, as I was clearly working out. The next one is when I decided that I was, after I graduated from UConn and I had no idea what I was going to do, and a friend of mine gave me an album as I was that I listened to as I drove away from Connecticut, having no idea what was next, headed to California, Joni Mitchell's Blue. And there's the song about California. And it was funny because it stirred in me like the sort of bone marrow memory of what it's like to be a native Californian. And California coming home, I'm gonna see the folks that dig, I'll even kiss the sunset peak. California coming home, oh, it gets so lonely when you're walking and the streets are full of strangers. All the news of home you read, more about the war than the bloody changes. Oh, will you take me as I am? Will you take me as I am? Will you take me? Oh, now I'm going to mess it up. But anyway, that song helped me accelerate my car across the continent back to this very special state. And it's broken, but it's also incredibly exceptional. That's all I can say about that. And then the last one, sorry, I could wax on again. We, in, 1982 or whenever, we discovered this new artist. And we were very excited in my family. I was 10. And so we were playing it. We had one of those old 1980s, 70s era, sound systems. So we'd crank up the volume, and we were like listening to "Sailing Takes Me Away."
Christopher Cross.
Oh, he's got it.
Yep.
As we go there, we're from the same era. And we listened to it, and I was very theatrical as a 10-year-old. And so I remember like having blankets over my shoulders and improvising sailing across the living room. And it was fascinating because somewhere in the middle of him getting Grammys and everything, all of a sudden we get a call from one of our cousins who says, "Hey, did you guys know that we're related to Christopher Cross?" And so we learned that Christopher Cross and my mother, through our Irish O'Connor roots, they're second cousins. And it was actually Christopher Cross's grandmother who set up my grandparents. And so I like to say that if it wasn't for his grandmother, I wouldn't be here today.
That's the Paradise album, I think, right?
Is it? I think it's the self-titled.
Maybe
it is. The flamingo on the cover.
Yeah, and there's it's green, and then there's like a circle and the light is on. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there.
So and then Video Killed the Radio Star. We won't even talk about that. But
that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Do you have any parting words of encouragement?
So, we talked about this. Don't underestimate the lessons to be learned from the hard days, right? Don't underestimate yourself and your ability to survive challenges and days when you feel like you can't do it. I think that those are instrumental to cultivating the fine wine of being like an MJC person, and that's not to say that MJC is a bad place, because it's not, but inevitably we're all trying to do good hard work together, and a lot of times we and it's an institution with a lot of different passionate, powerful agendas. And it's only in that friction of us, trying to achieve our ideas or our ideals, or maybe even the objectives of our job description, that we have to come together and have tension. It's what is it? Friction sharpens a pencil, right? That's like the metaphor that comes to me. And so believe in yourself. And I would say, early on when I was desperate and had like painful wisdom teeth, I had no idea that I was going to eventually find myself in the position I am now at the institution, where now I'm interfacing with all these different places and spaces, and I liaise with the University of California on behalf of the college and stuff. Like, never underestimate what you're capable of doing, and how much you're capable of managing on the way to sort of the goals you set for yourself.
Well said. Well said. Well, Letitia, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure that we could probably continue on with
I'm
at
sure.
least another hour, but it was a real joy. Thank you again
Likewise.
very much.
Thank you for having me. Love MJC.
Well, the winds are picking up and the barnacles are collecting on the bow. Time for us to set sail, me hearties. This episode was brought to you by Captain Carl's Carpet Cleaning, produced by this guy, and edited by Patchy 2 Times. Music by the Moon River Proctologist Band. Hey, if you're looking for the lost and found, or I owe you $20, you can always find me at peglegpodcast@gmail.com. As always, remember to keep your booty close and your sword sharp, lest you find yourself swabbing the deck on the bottom of Davy Jones's locker. Until we meet again.